Hi, my name's Justin Schuff, and I'm the engineering lead at PatchMyPC. We develop a third-party patch management solution for Microsoft SCCM. Prior to my current role, I was also a premier field engineer for Microsoft, supporting SCCM. In this video, we're going to do a couple of different things. The first thing that's kind of interesting, we're going to go through an environment that has a WSUS catalog that has not been properly maintained, meaning we haven't done any maintenance around declining superseded updates. So we're going to have quite a large WSUS catalog, and we're going to go over to a client and compare the scan time and the catalog download time. We're then going to compare that to our WSUS environment after we put in a maintenance plan for declining updates, configuring our IIS settings for memory and CPU limits, and doing some indexing. So a little background on this issue. This initially started happening and being known to the community about 2.5 years ago. As the catalog started growing and it hit a point to where it was so large, Windows 7 clients that were on the base level of Windows 7 Service Pack 1, the Windows Update agent started having some memory issues around scanning the catalog because the catalog was just growing and getting so big. It was having timeouts and CPU performance issues. It caused a lot of problems during building captures where you wouldn't have a recent version of the update agent, and it would just basically fail to scan and not send any results back to your site. So there's a blog post that went out. I'm going to reference this within the video and throughout the video, as well as include a link within the description. But basically, it's a guide that kind of goes over WSUS maintenance and how we can go in and index the database and do things such as declining updates and having that all set. We'll come back to that, but what I've got in my environment, I've got a software update point that has been configured, and I've got a few different products in here. It's certainly nothing out of the ordinary. If anything, I would say I probably have fewer products selected than probably many production environments would. So just quickly scrolling through this, we've got Office 2010, 13, 16, and 365. We've got our Windows 10, Windows 7, and Windows 8.1, as well as Windows Server 2008, 2008 R2, 2012, 2012 R2, and 2016. So there's not really all that much selected, but what we're going to do is go and look over at our WSUS catalog. So within WSUS, we can basically come into the All Updates field within that node. And what I'm viewing is any except declined with a status of any. So if we actually look in here, we can see that we have about 12,000 updates that are currently not declined. So what that means is on the client, if an update isn't declined, it's going to scan against that. So we're going to download the metadata and then see whether it's applicable to us. But what we can do if we just kind of browse out and click on a column, if we add the supersedence field and we sort by that, let me just kind of go up here. And let's go up the other way. So what we can see is if the update doesn't have anything in here, that means that it's not superseded. So as we start scrolling down, let's keep going down here. So once we get to the superseded updates, and you can tell that by the icon. So if the icon is kind of with the computer down in the bottom right, that means it's superseded. So we can look at the scroll bar over here, kind of go down and see what we've got going on. If the icon is in the middle, that means it's also superseded by a newer update. So we'll keep going down. And now we've got the active updates that are showing here that have superseded other updates. So if we kind of go through, select this, look at that scroll bar. So if we kind of go up here, we can see that we have probably about 2/3 of the updates within this catalog are actually superseded. So what that means is a newer update has replaced it. And generally speaking, there's not going to be really any reason why you would want to ever scan or deploy these updates as long as you have that newer one being deployed within your environment. Now on the config manager side, this is a new site and I just synchronized my updates. So within config manager, the console, we can actually verify that the number is quite a bit smaller than 12,000. So it's right about 4,100. So it is going to filter out any superseded updates based on your supersedence settings here. So within your software update point, you can configure whether you want to immediately expire superseded updates and then they'll get purged out of your console within a week. But since this was a clean environment, they just did not show up during that initial sync. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and start the client up. By default, it's delayed, so it can take a couple minutes or so. And then we're just going to review the log files. I did clear the logs just while we restarted so we could start fresh when we're viewing these. But what I'm going to do is start a network capture. So I'm just using a free trial of this application that I found to be pretty helpful. So we'll get that started in the background here. And what we'll do, we'll go look at the scan agent log, and then we'll initiate a scan on our client. Now, this is a client that has just registered not long ago, and it hasn't performed any type of software update scan within our environment. So we'll open up that log. We're also kind of browse over to the Windows update log. And we'll let that run, and we'll do a few things while we're waiting for that to finish. The first thing that I'm going to do is stop the component for the state manager. So this component is what processes updates into the database for compliance that gets sent back from our machines. So I'm going to open up my configuration manager where we can stop different components. We're going to browse down to the components and look at the SMS_state system. So this is going to be the component, and I don't want to go too deep into what we're doing here, but what we're going to do is look at the file that gets sent up. But what we're going to do in the next video is basically cover the software update flow all the way down from all the client components up to the server components. The reason I wanted to do this is I'm going to show you the size difference between a state message that gets sent up for your update compliance for a environment that isn't declining updates versus one that is. We can also verify in the IIS logs for WSUS that our client is hitting the server, and we can kind of look at what's going on the back end. So this .190 or .200 here, this is our client. So we can see that it is doing the scan in the background. It's hitting IIS and doing a few different things here. Now it's okay to see some red. Now what I did on this Windows 7 machine is I did update the Windows Update agent to the latest one that was publicly available for download. Other than that, it's not fully patched at all. It's just a base level Service Pack 1 machine with that latest Windows Update agent. So what you will notice is we will get a couple scan retries during the initial scan. And that's okay. We can just kind of monitor this. But what I'll do, I'll go ahead and pause this while we wait for the scan to complete. All right, so that scan just completed. So it looks like it took about a little bit over 4 to 5 minutes for the scan. Now, if we come and look at our network trace, what we're going to look at is the Ethernet, the IPv4, the TCP filter, and then we're going to look at the port. So what we can verify here is we can look for port 8531. So that's what my WSUS server is running on. There'd be nothing else communicating on that port except our WSUS scanning. So what we can look at is our download and upload size. So if we look over at the download, what we can see is that the total data for our catalog that was downloaded from WSUS was about 13.5 megabytes. Okay, so jumping back over to our client, we can look at the state message.log. This is where any type of compliance changes are going to be stored for update compliance when we send it up to our management point for processing into our database. So let me just look at the appended one. And we can see that it was sent up to the management point. So what we did on that management point when we stopped that component, we basically stopped the component that actually processes software update compliance sent up from our clients into our database. So that's going to live in our inboxes. And this can be another reason why software updates can have a big impact if you're not maintaining them, because you have all your clients sending their states. So if that catalog's huge, it's going to be much more data coming into your environment. So within the auth and the state sys.box, we're going to have an incoming folder. But it looks like there's nothing there, so it must have got processed. Let me go and look over here. Looks like that component might have restarted itself, but luckily I do have a previous one that was stored. So this file was about 270 KB, but what this contains is all the software update states that have been changed. So for example, these IDs actually translate into a software update ID. So if we go and run a search within all software updates based on this ID, it's going to actually return a update. And we can see it does look like the compliance did change, so that file definitely did get processed. But the main thing I wanted to note is that file size. It was about 270 KB when the catalog was full size. So that's going to be the catalog scan that gets sent up to Config Manager to process into the database. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and implement a maintenance plan for how we're going to go in and decline these updates. So there's a few things that I want to start off with. If you haven't already changed your WSUS IIS application pool settings, this would be a good time to do that. So we did cover this during our initial video, but what we're going to do here is go into IIS, go into our application pools and then your WSUS website, look at the WSUS pool and then the advanced settings. So the default value here is going to be 1000 for the queue length. You would want to set that to 2000. I've already done that. And then the next setting is we would want to change the memory by 4 times, which I've already done that as well. But if you're using a default environment, what this would be if it wasn't a multiple of 4, you'd probably see something here like 1843200. So you'd want to make sure you change that and then recycle the IIS service. The next thing I'm going to do is index my database for WSUS. Now, the blog post does mention you could run the WSUS cleanup before doing the indexing if you wanted to. But in my case, I'm going to index and then set up my maintenance script that does all the cleanups, and it has the WSUS cleanup built into the declining updates within that script. So within the post, and I'll link out, there is a script that we can use for maintaining WSUS with regards to the re-indexing of the database, just to make sure that we have good performance as that database becomes fragmented. So within SCCM, I'm going to open up my SQL Management Studio on that server that's running WSUS, and then I'm going to run a new query and paste in that command for indexing and then execute it. Now we could either run this on a schedule through SQL Management Studio, or we could create a new maintenance plan and have it run that script automatically for us. So it looks like it's done. So that did the indexing for me. Now, if you're using a WID database, hopefully you're not, but maybe if you have child SUPs, you are. Within the guide, it does go through the process of how you could use SQL CMD to run the maintenance command for indexing on a WID environment. And while we're in SQL on our WSUS environment, there is a maintenance script that we can run that creates 2 different indexes that helps the process of declining updates to go much quicker. So there's a few blog posts that I'll link out to that kind of covers what we're actually doing here. This will be one of them, but just note this will make the process of declining updates about 30 times faster if you go ahead and make these indexes. So what we're going to do, we're going to make sure we have the SUSDB selected. It looks like it does actually call that within the script, I believe. So you could even run this on wherever you're currently at in SQL. I'm going to execute that. Looks like I had that highlighted. Let me just execute it all again. And we can just verify that it made those two indexes. That makes the cleanup process much faster. And now we're at a point where we can go ahead and start putting in our maintenance script for declining updates. So there's a few out there. So within the blog post, there's a PowerShell script within the main blog that kind of talks about this when it was initially causing problems with scanning, where you can download a PowerShell script that runs here. But actually the script that I'm going to be using is one from Bryan. So I'll link out to his blog post. This is the best one that I've used. So I've implemented multiple ones back when I was a PFE, including the one from the blog post, as well as some other ones. But this one I was super impressed with. It gave a lot of custom options that we can do for doing things like running the WSUS maintenance task after the script, declining and removing expired updates from your software update groups in SCCM. So there are a lot of nice things that we can configure within here that would not be available in some of the other scripts. So we'll just note out we have about 12,000 updates currently that are active and not declined. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and look at my script. So I've pre-downloaded it. I'll include a link out to his post. But what you're going to get here when you extract it is a PowerShell script, and then we're going to get a plugins folder. Now within the plugins folder, there's actually a pretty cool options here. So what I'm going to do is go over to the Windows 10 versions. So within here, we're going to see a bunch of different versions that we can call out as unsupported. And what that will do, that will decline any of those versions of Windows 10, any of the updates matching that. So for example, if I come over here and look at my, if I create a new update view and look at the upgrades classification, we're going to see a bunch of different updates that will go through and upgrade our machines to different versions of Windows. So we can see all these versions: 15.11, which isn't supported anymore, 16.03, 17.03, 17.09. And we're also going to have within our updates, we're going to have a bunch of different cumulative updates for all these versions. So if we search for 16.07, for example, we're going to have all these different updates for those versions of Windows 10. Now, let's say that you've moved on and you're at the latest version of 18.03, and you have like 5 versions before that that you don't really care about. So these are also going to come into our catalog and take up a lot of space and scan data on our clients. So within the script, we can do some customization and tell it whether we want to decline unsupported versions. So in my lab, I'm just going to decline everything except the current version of 18.03, because that's what I'm running on all my clients. Now, obviously in production, you might be running 17.09 and even 17.03. So you wouldn't want to decline updates that you currently have out there for the different builds of Windows 10. So I'll go ahead and save that. And in order for this to be active, we're just going to go ahead and cut it. And I'm going to move it from the disabled folder to the root of the plugins folder. There's some other things you can do here, like declining the previous versions for Office 365, so you always get the latest version and you don't scan against the older. You can also decline different editions of Windows 10. So if you only support Windows 10 Enterprise, for example, you can go and decline others. Same thing with languages. We can decline different languages within here. But I think this looks good for what I'm going to use initially. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and come to my task scheduler. So I'm going to create a maintenance task that's going to run this PowerShell script. So I'm going to create a new basic task. call it WSUS maintenance. We're going to run it daily. Now, most environments, you could probably do this weekly or even monthly, but within our labs, we've actually got third-party updates publishing out, and we generally do 3 to 4 catalog releases per patch my PC, and we would expire the previous version. So I'm just going to keep this daily within my environment, but this could certainly be weekly or probably even monthly if you were only doing just Microsoft updates. I'm going to run it at 3 a.m. You would probably want to avoid running it at the same time that your software update point is set to synchronize. And for the script, we're going to run PowerShell.exe. And then within the PowerShell script, there's a variety of different options that we can use here. That's not what I want. We want to go back to the root and then the invoke. So he goes over a lot of the different examples of options we can add. But for this example, let me just bring into the screen what I'm doing. So I'm running the script. I'm declining superseded updates. I'm also declining by title. So I'm declining Itanium, IA64, and Beta. So any update title that contains this will also be declined. We're declining by plugins. So that's going to run the option that I did to decline the previous builds. We're going to clean our software update groups, so any update groups that have expired updates, they'll get removed out. If any update groups are left as empty, it will go ahead and clean and remove those. We're going to run the WSUS cleanup wizard. We're going to resync our SUP. We're going to reset the max time for our cumulative updates within Windows, just so it has longer than the default of 10 minutes so it doesn't fail. I think this has been increased in the latest configuration manager builds where it does run longer than 10 minutes, so that should be less of an issue. I'm going to go ahead and keep that to increase that to 60 minutes for the timeout. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that argument, and then we're going to paste that into the task and then do next. We're going to open the properties, and what we're going to do is change it so that it runs under system context. So that will run whether or not a user is logged in, and that will ensure we have full access to WSUS on this machine. And I'll go ahead and choose run with highest privileges. Go ahead and do OK, and we'll go ahead and start running. So if we come back to that scripts folder, there is going to be a maintenance log that will show up. So the first thing it's going to do is go out and search for all the updates, and then it's going to go through and decline anything based on the options that we enabled. So I'll go ahead and pause here, and then we'll come back to this. All right, so this script has been going about 10 or 15 minutes now. One thing I do want to look at is this is also going to help us clean up the Windows 10 updates for the servicing. So if we take a look at how many updates we have currently, it's right about 980 updates. So we can see all these different additions and all these different versions for the feature upgrades. So we'll just take a note of that, and we'll come back in once we get everything optimized and see how much that drops from 980. All right, so the core part of the script is now done. You can see that we had a total of about 12,101 updates. We had 6,293 that were superseded. And then we had some additional ones that we declined based on titles. And the total number of declined updates for this script for this run was 7,805. So that almost was about double of what we had total that we declined. So we do have a few additional things going on here. Since I had the option to enable the software update point sync enabled, we can see that it did initiate a software update point sync. If we come over to our logs in SCCM, we can verify that wsyncmgr is now performing a software update point sync. So we'll pause and wait for that to complete. All right, so the first run is done. Now I did miss a few things I'm going to come back and configure. If we come look in WSUS, we can see that We still have the additional languages for the feature updates. So what I'm going to do is come back over, go to my script, and then the plugins, disabled, and then I'm going to copy the languages, paste that over, and then edit that. And what I'm going to do is disable the all languages from here and only have English. Close that, and then we're going to come run this again and see if we get those additional languages completed. It looks like it's still monitoring the update sync though, so we'll just give that a few minutes and then we'll come back in. All right, so the script is now complete. So if we come back in here, and we'll go ahead and run it one more time and see if it declines the languages that we had. All right, so we can see it's running, and we can see that it's declining all those languages for the feature upgrades that we didn't have enabled. Since we only had EN for English enabled, it's going ahead and removing all of those. Okay, so we can see that that took an additional 73 updates out. So if we come back into WSUS and refresh, we can see for the feature upgrades, we've only got 4 enabled now. So that's going to be the 1803 that we have supported. All the previous ones were declined. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and decline the Great Britain version of EN since I don't need that within our lab. Now, one thing I did notice with the script is it doesn't decline the Windows 7 and Windows 8 upgrades. Since SCCM, they actually block this. So for example, if we come and look at the feature upgrades, we can see that we've got all these showing expired now. But we can see we don't have any of those Windows 7 or Windows 8 feature upgrades to Windows 10 because SCCM doesn't support that. That's a standalone WSUS feature. So what I'm going to do here, just to account for these, now this is something Bryan said that he is going to update his script to support declining the Win 7 and Win 8 feature upgrades through WSUS to decline those within the script. So I'm going to go ahead and get those declined. So in SCCM, the Win 7 or Win 8 feature updates would be only available through a task sequence. All right, so went ahead and declined those additional updates. So if I click refresh now, we've only got 2 feature upgrades currently showing up now. So this looks really good. So going back, we can go to our all updates and do a refresh here. And we can see after the maintenance that we did, we're down from about 12,100 updates to 3,583. So that's quite a bit of that catalog that should be minimized when our clients are doing our scan. So let me just check our WSUS Sync Manager log. It looks like the sync was successful here. Now I do have a child software update point that's not online. That's why it's failing to connect there, but I'm not too worried about that. So for the feature upgrades, the script automatically ran the sync after we did the languages, but I don't think it ran after we did our feature updates. Let's see. So let's add expired equals no. So it actually looks like we're good. So I must have declined all those updates before the sync was completely done. So now we only have those 2 feature updates showing. All the other ones are expired. So we can see all these updates. Same thing with all software updates. So we are going to have quite a few updates now that will be showing expired that were declined. So by default, SCCM will remove any updates that are expired if they aren't being deployed in a software update group within 7 days from the expiration date. But what we can do here is I've got a script that we can run that will configure the wsyncmgr component to delete those more frequently than that 7 days. So we can get all these things to delete immediately. So I'll include this in the video, but basically what we're doing, we're pointing out to the server that's running the software update point. we're going to give it the site code, and we're going to give it the value we want. So the default value is every 7 days. If an update's been expired for 7 days and it's not being deployed, it's going to purge it from the SCCM site. So I'm going to change that to 0. So it's going to purge it right away. So then what I'll do is come over to here. To the downloads folder, and I'm going to run the adjust, and then we're going to give it the server name and the site code. We can see that we changed that age from 7 to 0. And then if we come back and look at the wsyncmgr log, we'll give that a moment to kick in, but I believe this, there we go, deleting old updates. That should automatically force it to trigger this when that component gets changed. And there we go. So we deleted 1,680 updates from the console. So if we do a little refresh here, there really shouldn't be anything expired showing. So that looks pretty clean. And then for the feature updates, it's also going to remove them from there. So there should be only the 2 updates. So this looks really good. So now what we'll do, we'll go back to our client for Windows 7. I'm going to revert this back to a clean state where it hasn't done any scan yet. So we'll start that guy back up. Okay. We'll reconnect. Okay. Let's go ahead and get that trace started before our scan starts. Okay. Let's see if we can get that component stopped so we can check out the state message that gets sent up. Components. We're going to stop that state system so that the updates don't get processed. And we'll come back to our client. Go ahead and get that scan going. It looks like all the components seem to be running now. We'll look at that scan agent, and we'll wait for that to complete. All right, so on the client side, we're all done. We can see that we didn't get any of the scan retries with the clean catalog like we did for the other one. So that looked really good. The timing was about 3 minutes. I did get a peek at the state message file, but it looks like the component did start back up automatically. It was about 250 KB, so it was a bit smaller, but the big savings are definitely going to be on the WSUS side, since SCCM can already kind of clear out some of those superseded and expired updates. So looking back at our trace, if we zoom in on our WSUS scan port, we can see that we went from 13.5 megabytes to a scan of downloading the catalog of only 1.87 meg. So quite a large bit of resources that we're going to be saving there, especially on that initial scan. Back on the SCCM side of things, I did notice that it did go through some additional deletion of expired updates. So it did purge out an additional 7,189 updates from the console that were declined within WSUS. But I think that covers really what I was looking at accomplishing in this video with regards to maintaining your WSUS environment. I will note that there are quite a few additional options as far as different community scripts for declining updates. There's also going to be some more configurations that we can do within IIS, and I'll link out to the deployment research site for a blog post that covers a few additional items that you can do if you're having issues declining updates with timeouts in IIS. as well as some additional things that we can configure with regards to some other scripts. But I think the core thing here is if you can get this implemented, even how I did it initially, if you haven't done any type of maintenance, you can see that catalog size. You can get a savings of, about 85 to 90% of what the client's going to have to download and scan. So that's all I've got today. I think in the next video, we're probably going to be covering software updates, the flow of updates. So we'll go through all the configuration manager client components, as well as the Windows Update Agent. And then on the server side, we'll go into how updates get processed into the database and how the views work within your content. And then after we go through the flow of the updates, we'll probably do something around some ways that we can manage our software update groups and deployments in a following video.